Okay, good afternoon and Happy New Year to everybody, and welcome to the first Urban Living webinar of 2021. Today we're going to be talking all things F&B, and I've got a fantastic panel here to discuss all these matters with, and we'll introduce you to them lately. Today's session is kindly sponsored by harmonics, and we'll hear from them shortly too. Before we kick in, I just wanted to talk briefly about what we've done as an organisation in the last year. As a publisher and an events company, obviously the event side of the business has been affected quite badly by the pandemic. But we've taken the opportunity to pivot and really bring the web content to the fore. So over the year, we hosted 38 webinars, which attracted more than 6,500 registrations for the whole series. The average attendance for those was in excess of 100 for each session, and we had nearly 200 senior and C-suite contributors across the series. And our three B2B news websites had almost 1 million unique websites during the year, which is something that we're very committed to, is bringing all the latest news and views to the sectors that we engage with. So this session is the first in the second series of Urban Living webinars, and these are all a precursor to a great new event that we are launching in July this year at Tobacco Dock in London, the Urban Living Festival Live. And this is based around the convergence between all the various hospitality and real estate asset classes and how that trend is increasing. It was originally scheduled for July 2020, then November 2020, and now we are going to do it, albeit a year later than when we first intended. It's going to be a fantastic event, and we really hope to see as many of you there as possible. So just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Apart from our panelists, if you could keep yourself muted and your camera off, that would be great. We're going to have about a 45-minute discussion, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. And if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them using the chat function in Zoom. A recording of the session will be sent to everyone who's registered on Monday, I believe. My name's George Sell. I'm the editor-in-chief here at IHM. I've actually got nearly 20 years experience now as a hospitality and travel journalist. So before we kick off, I wanted to give the session a bit of context. It's a big subject, F&B, and against the background of hospitality and real estate, there have been some big changes in the last few years, even pre-pandemic. So we'll start here with a quote from Emma Banks, who heads up F&B strategy at Hilton. And she said that historically hotels have been almost complacent in the area of F&B, sometimes with service and quality not at the highest standard, or with food coming from one central production kitchen going to individual outlets. And the gist of what she's saying, and I think a lot of people in the sector have agreed, is that hotels have had to up their game in the face of increasing competition. The pandemic has seen a huge surge in food delivery business. The recent DoorDash IPO in the States generated huge amounts of coverage in the financial press over there, almost as much as Airbnb. And that company handled more than 500 million orders between January and September this year, a threefold increase on the previous year. Michael Roper, the CEO of a healthy fast food chain called Muscle Maker Grill, doesn't think that this is a trend that's going to stop, even when the situation reverts to something like normality. He says once they learn how easy it is, the food comes on time, it's hot, it's good, just the convenience, they're going to keep doing it. The whole industry has changed. Uber Eats generated more revenue than Uber Rides in Q2 of Uber's financial year. And the dark kitchen phenomenon is really making itself felt too. Market Scale says for small hotels and restaurateurs, adding a dark kitchen could allow you to break into delivery and catering without expanding your current footprint. It offers you a way to trial run what entering other segments could look like. And in Singapore, F&B beverage company Ebb and Flow has launched a brand. I'm guessing that is called Rap Bastard. I don't know if anyone else has got any better guesses than that. And that's a dark kitchen driven by AI and analytics. So that's a glimpse into the future. Euromonitor says ghost kitchens could be a 1 trillion global industry by 2030. And although there has been a huge rise in food delivery, and we think that's here to stay, there is some good news for restaurants and hotel restaurants and eating in as well. A survey done in October in the UK by the Sustainable Restaurant Association found that 76% of those polled said they would revert to their previous habits of dining out up to 4 times a month as soon as they were able. I wasn't one of those polled, but I would be in among the 76% of if I was. You know, I can't wait to get back to eating into restaurants. Other things to mention, we're seeing other asset classes such as build to rent and senior living, hiring hospitality professionals and including high quality F&B offers in their developments. And lastly, the pandemic is speeding up the introduction of technology such as contactless booking, ordering and payment, QR codes, bill splitting apps, and so on. So today's session is kindly sponsored by Harmonics, and I'm just going to play a very short video to tell you a bit more about them.
Harmonics is 100% dedicated to service departments and co-living, bringing together all the tools you need to drive performance and deliver a great guest experience. From channel management and direct bookings to finance, housekeeping, maintenance and customer journey automation, whether centrally or on the move, the platform consolidates all information into one system, saving you time, improving communication and maximising business performance.
If you'd like to hear more from those guys, we've put the contact details for the team at Harmonics in the chat, so you can contact them through there. So we've got a fantastic panel of contributors here today. I'm going to ask them all to quickly introduce themselves, and I'll go in the order that we see on the slide here. So Erik Jacobs, would you like to go first, please?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Yeah, my name is Erik Jacobs. I represent a Asia-based family office that is pretty active in the hospitality sector across Southeast Asia, Australia, and Europe. My responsibility is the European expansion, and our exposure to Europe is that we own a hotel in Paris, the 25 hours, strong track record in F&B, obviously. We also own a hotel management platform called Cycus Hospitality, for which we operate hotels throughout Europe with various degrees of food and beverage exposure. And we are a shareholder in a food market concept called Arcade, which opened last year in central London. And yeah, so that's in our exposure in Europe, and then of course in Southeast Asia we own and operate our hotels ourselves, so have quite a lot of exposure there as well.
Great, thanks, Erik. Erik Jafari, would you like to go next?
Thank you, George. Yeah, my name is Erik Jafari. I'm the co-founder, creative director, and chief development officer at Edyn. We're the owner of Lock Hotels, in addition to Seiko, the Moorgate, and the Wittenberg. I'm also on the side. With respect to Lock, for those of you that are aware, we've opened 4 Lock properties last year. We've got 7 now open and trading across the UK and Ireland. And we've got another 5 scheduled to open this year across Ireland, UK, and Germany. At each Lock property, we have anywhere between 1 and 4 F&B partners / tenants, really trying to forge a destination experience. Everything from gin distilleries to microbreweries, vegan izakaya to the dairy, which is arguably the kind of the #1 farm to table concept in the UK. But yeah, it's that's my background.
Thanks, Erik. Faraz.
Thanks, George. I'm Faraz Nagree. So I'm the founder of the Lean Kitchen Network. Lean is an agency that has developed a suite of proven brands, food brands, that we license to operators with underutilized kitchen space. So entertainment venues, hospitality venues, hotels. We have a range of brands across a number of different food types, and we help our partners update their on-site food offering, as well as giving them everything they need to switch on delivery for their local radius. So that goes from the technology to the marketing, to the supply chain. It's a one-stop solution.
Thanks, Faraz. Heleri.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, George, for inviting me to be on the panel. My name is Heleri Rande. I'm a partner at Think Hospitality. We are a collection of individuals from different parts around the world who collaborate on hospitality projects, primarily focusing on F&B, helping brands, owners, operators assess the market, understand the concept positioning, recommend operators, and we work, like I said, in the UK, mainland Europe. We have partners also in Middle East and the Americas as well.
Thanks, Heleri. And last but not least, Jason.
Jason, you got to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, Jason. Actually, all you guys on the panel, you can keep your mics on all the time. I think it will make life easier.
Hi,
Yeah,
can you hear me
Jason.
now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Great.
Fire away.
Thanks, George, for the brief introduction. Yes, my name is Jason Wischhoff. I'm the Managing Director for Benihana International. We own the global rights for Benihana, license-wise, international, anything outside the US and South America. And we were acquired by Minor International, which is a huge public listed company based out of Thailand with a 6 billion market cap, which has about 2,500 restaurants and other entities such as hotels, and some of those you may well know, which is the Tivoli, NH Hotels, Amantara and Avani, with many adventurous brands across Africa. With that, my role is to grow the Benihana, so internationally, whether that's within a hotel space or standalone. And to date, we have 19 outside those regions, across the ponds in various parts across the world. And with sign-ins progressing, that we signed in November for Qatar for 3 units. We just opened up the JW Marriott Benihana in Phuket in December, and progressing on with a number of opportunities in Central and Southern Europe.
Thanks, Jason. You guys can see the LinkedIn profiles for all our speakers in the chat. So if you want to contact them and carry on the conversation after this, then please drop them a line. So harking back to one of the context points we had earlier, the UK poll that Sustainable Restaurant Association did said that 76% of those polled want to go out to eating out as often as they did pre-pandemic. So we are going to try and conduct a poll here and ask everybody watching and see if that tallies with our audience. So Justin, if you could launch the poll, please. Can anybody see a poll?
Yeah, I voted.
Yeah.
That's a relief, Heleri. I suspect that you're probably going to eat out more often, even though I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a skewed audience here, so let's see what's the what it says.
Great stuff. Okay, so we'll have the results of that towards the end of the session. First, I want to kick off by asking you guys how your business has fared through the pandemic and what the key learnings from 2020 have been for your businesses. So let's go from left to right and start with you, please, Jason.
Yeah, sure. Where do you want me to start?
Well, just give a top line. I know it's a big question, but just give a top line.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I joined back end of September 2019, so I had a good few rolling months of good trading, And then come March, it was an essential lockdown over days that, you know, literally reservations were dwindling from 1,000 down to 0 in a matter of hours. And effectively we had to cope with that. So it was a huge task, because one is it was very much done at short notice. So we have perishable items, non-perishable items that we have to look at stock. Operation, we have to look at the staff, how are we going to deal with this, and closing down and as quickly as possible. So that was a challenge and a half. And then obviously having to, you know, cross-analyze to see, you know, where we are on budgets, and many reviews taking place, you know, prior to then with consideration that we could open on the second outing, which then came back in July. And, you know, we had been looking at a number of different options, because, you know, we were looking to almost do what we call the new normal, trying to readjust, because we've never been a delivery outlet, so to speak. So looking at different options on how we can still generate revenue. But I guess being in the locations that we're in, you know, and I'm probably talking more about London, because being in prime locations such as Chelsea and Piccadilly, Mayfair, very difficult to meet, you know, when you've got fixed cost. And trying to maximize revenue on a delivery platform, which should only be proportionalized, as opposed to trying to pay back everything that you can't now, because obviously the dining is now closed. So many challenges that we had to deal with. But I have to say that as much as challenging as it was, and having to deal with the different hurdles of, you know, coming in and out of lockdowns as a group, and being you know, a renowned brand that's been around for about 56 years. We've proven that, you know, we have a good loyalty follower, you know, that is attached to our brand, and they keep coming through that door. So, you know, and being able to achieve you know, almost 60% of budget throughout 2020, I think it speaks highly from a strong brand that has a strong presence.
Thanks, Jason. Faraz, I'm guessing your experience is probably slightly different from most of the other people here, in that demand for your offer has probably grown throughout the year. Would I be right in thinking that?
There's two sides to it. So I think, as a lot of other people in the room would be feeling, the starting and the stopping and the constant uncertainty has been really difficult for everyone, including our business. And a big part of our business is delivery, but it's not the only part. So obviously, we've seen that the on-site part, the on-site menus have not been moving, we've not been open. A lot of the on-site part of our offering. Delivery, we have seen a spike, especially during the first lockdown. Things kind of normalized through the rest of the year, and we saw numbers rising again at the back end of the year. But the thing that really stood out for me was that penetration for delivery, and a lot of the areas that were typically quite low, you know, outside of the big city centres, has really grown. So we've seen huge growth there as more and more people are picking up delivery that wouldn't have thought of it later. And we've seen the likes of Uber and Deliveroo launching many new locations that weren't in their plans at the beginning of 2020, and kind of accelerating a lot of those rollout plans. So that's kind of had an impact on us. But because our business is also about working with lots of, you know, working with underutilized kitchens and third-party operators, we're also, you know, working on their timelines, and that's meant a lot of change for us at the same time.
Thanks, Faraz. Erik Jacobs, what have been your key learnings from the F&B side of the businesses that you're involved with?
It's pretty hard to take kind of learnings from an event like this, because it's a forced shutdown in many instances, right? If I look at you know, our Paris hotel, we just had to close down. If I look at the you know, the close to 1,000 square meter food market in central London, it's hard to take a learning from an event like this, because it's quite binary. It's just open or closed. You know, the delivery is at times a solution, but hasn't been a solution to us in these events. In some of the hotels, it could be a solution, but yeah, it's quite difficult. Of course, there's going to be things to do different kind of going forward, right? In terms of consumer behavior within spaces, right? And needing to adapt to that, and that those of course are new teams that everybody is going to adapt to. But yeah, it's quite difficult to really take a lesson learned because it's just been so extreme, the events that we had or having.
Have any of the extended stay hotels that Sycas operate managed to trade through, and if so,
yeah, they're trading pretty well, actually, remarkably well in their own right. But the extended stay that we're running, as opposed to what Erik is doing, is having very little F&B. It's really a breakfast offering, and oftentimes that's all that we do. So from an F&B perspective, we're not kind of negatively or positively impacted there. The general performance, of course, of extended stay is remarkable, right? How that's remained strong during this crisis. But yeah.
And Erik, Jafari, how has the Lock properties fared, and what have you learned from the pandemic so far?
Yeah, I mean, better than anticipated. I mean, as everyone's kind of pointed out, extended stay has kind of emerged as a very resilient business model. I mean, we were assuming occupancy levels of kind of 30-40%, and when the year was over and done with, we had traded at approximately 65% or higher. With a blended occupancy, and that includes 2 fairly large hotels that we opened in the middle of the pandemic. 65% occupancy for those hotels in a normal year, during ramp up would have been good, not great, but the fact that they achieved those occupancy levels in the current landscape was really quite remarkable. We actually got a lot of learnings out of this, partially because of the infrastructure. As Erik pointed out, Lock is very much rooted in destination dining, but we don't actually operate the spaces ourselves. We outsource them to kind of best-in-class operators, and we work with them. And so, unlike a traditional third-party tenant where you just sign a fixed lease and you don't worry about it and all the problems are theirs, it's a turnover lease. And although we're not subject to all of the challenges that they've gone through, we do roll our sleeves up and get into the trenches with them. And so we spent a fair bit of the year working with our F&B operators, really trying to understand their challenges. And a lot came out of it. We found that the turnover lease structure was very appealing to some operators who previously wouldn't have signed a lease with us. An example of such was, Robin Gill in the dairy, which is, I mentioned before, one of the top farm-to-table concepts in the UK. They'd been in Clapham for 8 years. The reason for why they were willing to relocate from Clapham over to Berman's, a lot of that had to do with the fact that our structure was a lot more tenant-friendly than the traditional F&B structure, which is, I just want my lease payments and I'm not willing to work with you. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. It's allowed us to attract and partner with far better tenants than we would have previously ever been able to partner with. We were able to evolve our offering. I mean, whereas nowadays, because we've got 65% occupancy, I think I've mentioned this in the past, we were able to partner with a number of different Michelin-starred chefs, so that at least on a once-a-week basis, the guests would come down, pick up a recipe box, they'd go up to the room, and we'd hold a Zoom class just like the one we're currently holding today, where the Michelin-starred chef would walk them through in the privacy of their kitchen on how to prepare a 4- or 5-star Michelin-starred meal. And it was exciting. Everyone got to get drunk together. Everyone got to prepare a meal, which would have been a lot of fun even pre-COVID. But the fact that we were able to offer this during COVID to our guests really blurred the lines between the experience that they would have expected in the common areas, and now the one that we're able to bring to their rooms. And so COVID has opened our eyes to the fact that the room, the apartment, typically in order to have an experience, you had to go downstairs to the common areas, to use the yoga, to experience a dining experience. Now we've learned that you can bring a lot of that to the room if you've got the right infrastructure. And so I suspect that some of that is here to stay.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Erik. Heleri, what have you noticed over the last year in terms of the projects that you're working on? Have have some been stalled? Has progress slowed, or are people kind of looking beyond this and carrying on?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, in March, pretty much, within a couple of days, about 70% of our projects just dropped because everyone was putting out fires and focusing on, the very sort of immediate goals. And what we decided to do is we said, okay, look, we can't just like sit around and think that it's bad. How can we help the industry? Because if you think about all the staff that was put on furlough and was staying at home with nothing to do, and people don't live in massive houses with big gardens, but they're most cramped up with other flatmates in their tiny flats. So we said, let's do a channel for the industry and amalgamate a lot of information on there. So we ran 8 sessions a day, 5 days a week for 4.5 months, having very sort of well-programmed events throughout the day, starting with mindfulness and yoga, going to front of house masterclass, then doing an industry update, talking to the world-renowned chef, doing a kitchen masterclass, doing a cooking demo, and ending with a drinks segment. And we got every single person we asked around the world. No one said no. Had incredible chance to interview so many 2-3-star Michelin chefs, great hospitality people from all around the world. We reached 500,000 people in those 4.5 months, and we did over 600 videos. They're all free on. We did via Facebook Live. That was a channel called Hospo Live. So there's some really good content there, and people still keep watching them. We're still getting really good feedback, because the one thing is we provided people with something to listen to and look forward to. We did pop quizzes. We did sort of everything to keep staff and people sort of engaged and motivated, because it's very draining mentally. And I think that painted a very good picture to also our clients who we couldn't work with at that time because all the projects were stopping. But we did give our input and say, look, we're here to help and we're here to give advice, and we are trying to collect information from all our sort of industry friends from around the world and see if there's something there that you could use for your business to help you through this. So just really getting that information in and then distributing it and doing it just for the betterment, knowing that there will be projects that come back and so they have, and there are longer term ones that never went away. So I mean, I think the people are looking beyond the sort of 2-3 year horizon, and those things are still going full steam ahead. And I think especially what we've seen in the last 2 months is a lot of requests coming in, especially from the Middle East, interestingly, of people looking to do different things in the hospitality space and just looking for advice. So I would say the market is really, really kind of upbeat right now in terms of the further future. We know that the next couple of months will be dire, and we just need to get through that. But I think I see a lot of optimism and a lot of sort of planning for the longer term future, which is really good to see.
Great, thanks, Heleri. So let's move on and talk a bit about in more detail about the rise in delivery culture and how far we think the pendulum might swing back to in-house dining when things are a bit more normal. Jason, do you want to talk to us about how you've adapted to the delivery business, and what do you think your core customer base will do when things get a bit easier?
Yeah, and I resonate very much, for what Erik mentioned as well, because we're a very experiential brand. So, what you see is what you get, because you're going to have a teppan chef who's going to animate and cook your Japanese steak and all the other ingredients for the next 40 to 45 minutes and animate you so that you're going to come away feeling, wow, what a fantastic evening I had. And, it's taken those core elements and actually having to almost get the board to agree, because it wasn't a channel that we looked at as a revenue item, and saying, okay, can we do this from a delivery standpoint? The question marks that we had on the delivery side was that if you look at the likes of Uber and Deliveroo, it's like a Wild West. So effectively they pick up and effectively they're running around like crazy, and you never know how that end delivery is going to be. So we had to still jump on the bandwagon with these guys, but effectively when I call it the Wild West, is that even under a Japanese menu option that you have on Deliveroo will come McDonald's offering a hamburger as such. It was just crazy. So there was a positioning statement just wasn't right there. But effectively we decided to relook at our asset stock in terms of photography. to see, you know, how we can become more creative, how we can look at the menu items and saying how we can create dishes that we feel by volume will come out of the door, as opposed to high-end driven, you know, from an average check of what we would normally do in the restaurant. We know we couldn't achieve that, but let's do items that are slightly cheaper. So we re-looked at that with all the Tepan chefs, came up with some options. Then we did a fresh photography. So we did a whole platform for the delivery service to portray this through the likes of Deliveroo and Uber. And then we also looked at other high-end platforms with the likes of Supper London, which are very good at what they do. And because we have a joint venture with the likes of Zuma and HORECA, it was getting feedback from them to understand, you know, how are they doing in this period of time, because they're very similar. Because from a, you know, from a keyword search and everything else that we did on Google, which we had to do a lot of desk research, we found that most people, as much as they've been to HORECA and Zuma and Nobu and everything else, those guests will still come into Benihana. But our price levels are nowhere near to them because they're much more premium to where we are. But there is a gap there that can be addressed, that we can jump in. But then looking at how they market in their products. And so we pretty much did a bit of a copycat, but not too much high end to give that sort of proposition that we are trying to get there, but we're not. And we did quite well through those channels. The problem being, again, is the delivery side of it. You know, we did get a few complaints coming through stating that you know, it took too long or it just wasn't delivered right. Pictures were sent to us. And yeah, it's trying to keep abreast of the quality control going forward from the delivery, because you have no control once it comes out of your door. Yeah. So those are some of the challenges that we had.
Do you think you won new customers though from adopting the delivery method? And do
yeah,
you think
definitely.
that we'll convert them to in-house diners, you know, when things ease up a bit?
Yeah, so from the first lockdown, and traditionally it's been with Benihana that it's always been family driven as a target market. But then as we reopened back again in July, very quickly we saw that a lot of couples, and it was all between the sort of age between 25 and 35, because we could pretty much get a lot of this data because we then had the QR codes in place. So from menus, then obviously they'll fill in, so we get data from that, and then we'll market that through our own loyalty system. So that helped us understand the new target market that we now need to start obviously profiling to, and to get them become more loyal and giving them more incentives to keep coming back. So that helped us and understand. And obviously, as you're aware, that, you know, people couldn't mix together. So couples that couldn't mix are now coming in and dining and trying to, you know, get the girlfriends or the boyfriends to be animated so they can have a great evening. So it was great fun, and it was a great new clientele that we actually took on board for Benihana going forward, that's for sure.
Erik Jafari, do you think that the various F&B outlets in your lock properties, have they seen an increase in the delivery business, and how does that work? Is it down to the individual operator to decide what they do?
It is, and different operators have taken different strategies. So for example, Robin Gill, his strategy has been to not pursue the likes of Deliveroo and create his own platform where people come and they come and pick it up directly from the restaurant, and it's actually a meal that is prepared, but you have to reheat. And so he's quite protective of the quality of the food experience. So he preps it to a certain point, you take it home, and then you throw it into the oven for 15-20 minutes, and then you eat it thereafter. Our vegan concept Alter has partnered with Dispatch, which was a very interesting concept where they have a pre-existing clientele, and they actually deliver the food experience throughout all of the UK. And so they did a beta test last week, and they estimated 30-40 orders, and they got 150. So it definitely surpassed any of their expectations. And so that was an interesting angle for them, and I suspect they're going to continue exploring that further. And then most of our coffee shops that, every one of our locks have some degree of kind of third wave coffee offering. Most of those remained open and have continued to trade well. The more residential the neighborhood, the better it's traded. The more corporate, like, for example, the City of London, the kind of the worse. But what they did during the last lockdown is they pivoted and elevated the experience by adding kind of a pantry element so that you could pick up flour, you could pick up, bread, you pick up, certain items, because at that point in time, there was a huge lead on grocery stores. And so there was kind of what I call the emergence of the bodega concept, where you can go downstairs, or the local neighbors would come in, pick up a coffee, get 3 or 4 grocery items, and then they'd head back, and they could hold them over until such time their Ocado order or Sainsbury order was actually delivered.
Thanks, Erik. When Jason was talking about new photography to go on the various delivery apps, it kind of brings me on to how to market your food currently at the moment, and I think social media is becoming a more important part of that. Faraz, perhaps you'd like to tell us how some of your brands do it, because I know some of them only market themselves via social media, if I'm right.
Absolutely. I think getting consumers excited about the food when you haven't got the ability to connect with them in a physical way is important. And so an example is when we started our business 2.5 years ago, we built our own in-house studios, and we partnered with a company called Jungle Creations, who are a social media agency. They own a channel called Twisted, and Twisted is the biggest food community in Europe. So they have about 34 million followers across Twisted. And our first brand, Twisted London, was a product of that Twisted social community. So it's an experiment to see could we get people really excited about the food through engaging and exciting content. And quite quickly that became one of the top selling brands through delivery online out of, from a standing start. And so I think it was a good proof point for us to build on. Actually, if you can build engaging, good looking content that goes alongside the food, you can get customers really excited about that experience. And there's more than just the content and the photography. It also, from a delivery perspective, there needs to be some kind of experience with the unboxing and maybe bits that you do yourself, reheating elements. I think that's also important. But we've kind of taken that mantra forward with all of our brands and made the content and photography and social media elements of them quite important, and not just important, a big part of the brand creation process.
Thanks, Faraz. Let's talk a bit about technology and how the pandemic has speeded up the implementation of certain technologies in F&B. Heleri, would you like to give us a sort of overview of some of the things that are becoming a given now, which perhaps weren't the case in 2019?
Well, I think contactless pay obviously is the really big one, especially at the start of the pandemic, and same with menus. Anything that you don't need to touch, just saying like on the hotel side of things, the more things that can go touchless, that when we're talking about the consumer facing aspects, that's become really, really key. And then that how actually that ties to your social media as well, the look and feel of the menu and what you can do with it on a digital channel. I think that's become a very big game changer. And then also on the back of house, streamlining, collecting more customer data, using that for your social media strategy and marketing. I think it's been a huge leap that we've seen in the restaurant side of things as well, of how many brands are embracing technology a lot more than they used to, and things that were kind of on the priority list number 5 and 6 have now jumped onto number 1 and 2 because it has become really crucial, and it's really the time to do it now, to implement those things, get your teams trained on that. And I think, Jason, you want to add something? I see you're raising your hand just like in school.
No, sure. I'm happy for you to carry on. Please, Heleri, I'll follow on afterwards. No worries.
No, go ahead. These are the two main things I really wanted to mention.
Yeah, and I would definitely add to the menu. I think that the sensitivity we had around the menu was that typically, as you know, front of house staff are typically on minimum salaries. So effectively, it's all about the service charge. So they have to upsell. So what do you put on the menu, and then what can you upsell? Because if you put everything on the menu, the guests will order, and then there's nothing more for the front of house servers to do. So we had to be delicate, because obviously majority of their earnings are coming from that side. And then secondly, the customer data is the cheapest option to gather your data, because, as Faraz says, we can go through a number of different social platforms, but then that's more of a marketing spend. And when you're preserving cash, you've got to be very careful and you know, confident that you know that you're going to get a good ROI on return that you're going to invest in marketing.
And I think we also saw a lot more sort of chefs going onto social media and talking about their concept and engaging more with the audience. And usually chefs are not the people that want to be so much in front. I mean, there are some, but the majority want to do and do their best in the kitchen. So we've seen a lot more social media engagement also from the team, and also the restaurants not talking about only about their chefs, but also about their service people, and doing like an Instagram takeover from different parts of their team. So giving sort of everyone around the table a voice. So we've seen a lot of this coming to the forefront as well. So I'm trying to put, interestingly enough, in a time when we can't socialize, some sort of human element. So it's not just pretty photos of dishes, but it's also stories about people and how they came to the teams, and really sort of trying to lift up sort of a bit more team spirit as well, and using technology and social media to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think.
Yes,
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the human element is critical. I think in a time like this where people are fighting for the underdog, and everyone empathizes with the personal struggle that the hospitality industry is going through. And so there's a lot more, there appears to be an emergence of loyalty, or a greater degree of loyalty towards the entrepreneur or the individual, the chef, who's just doing everything he can to protect the livelihoods of those working for him, than just the large corporate. And so I do think that the human touch is everything in the current climate. Now, whether that's here to stay, that's a different story.
Yeah. Heleri, I'm going to paraphrase Bob Puccini, who you used to work with, who used to say that most diners can't differentiate between very good and really top drawer food, and for them they rate the experience precisely on the experience, you know, the atmosphere, the service, and so on. So if we're moving more and more to a technological process, and especially at the moment where, you know, we have to have PPE and screens and so on, how can restaurants retain that element of experience and a certain element of show and flamboyance when the tech is becoming more important?
Well, I think tech has always been more of an enabler, right, than anything else, and I think it should stay that way in the majority of cases. I mean, I know, you know, there are certain types of restaurants that will benefit from a fully automized back of house and front of house, and that's the concept, right? But we were talking about experience, and just what Erik was saying right now as well, is it's not going to go anywhere, this human element, and it's been so interesting to see how many different ways hotel restaurants, independent restaurants have tried to use that, whether it's turning your otherwise boring ballrooms into cinemas, and doing it for, you know, 20, 30 couples, and doing the food concept that matches what's on screen, with, you know, the dish being served that's being cooked on screen in a scene at the same time in the audience. You know, these very small things, and yes, you can do it for a small audience, but it's great engagement, and people will remember that, and that builds loyalty. So I think there's a, you know, laundry list of really creative things that we've seen happen around the world in hotel restaurants and independent restaurants, and everyone trying to use some sort of a human element as much as they can, with all the distancing, with all the PPE, but also using that in, you know, whether it's interesting masks and doing sort of something around the whole mask wearing and disinfecting hands sort of theme. So I think it's really bringing out, in some ways, the best creativity in people, because you can see what's possible in a time when everything is almost impossible. So I think technology will stay sort of I would hope so, just to see that more sort of as a facilitator, and making processes easier, and trying to understand your guests better, because you can collect that data and you can use the right softwares and the right providers to do so, and you can eliminate a lot of sort of admin work, but I think everything in the forefront is still going to be relying on that human interaction. And I think even more so once we start seeing restrictions go down, because it's been such a buildup of living in our tight quarters, that I think we're going to see a sort of huge blow up of people trying to go out and have a good time, because that's what restaurants are about. They're the social fabric. It's where people go to have a good time, and I think that's what we need to deliver as a hospitality business.
I do. The one, just to piggyback off of what Hiller's saying, I think if you think about what's happened over the course of the last 12 months, we've all been conditioned to find ways to enjoy or embrace being antisocial, not going out, staying at home. And so in response to that, there's a large number of people that have discovered, kind of an appreciation for cooking. Deliveroo has improved its quality, stay at home, eating, having food delivered home. So the real question is, although everyone does want to go out, the real question is why are they going out? What experience is it that the restaurant or the F&B, is it that it's going to deliver that you can't replicate at home? Because if it is simply as simple as spending time with friends, now people have found ways to, let's be honest, it's happening behind closed doors. People are spending time with one another, which is why COVID has been rampant, despite lockdown. And so the real key, and I do think that there'll be a backlash, there'll be a return, but I do think it'll be a winner take all, because it'll be the concepts that really nail the experience that you cannot replicate at home. If you have an experience that cannot be replicated at home, that's the one that people are going to covet when they go out, because they recognize that this is what what's been missing for the last 12 months.
But I also think that they're missing a change of scenery, right? So it's anything but the house. So I think that we will see quite a bit of that as well, probably more in the short term when things open up. But I think I completely agree with you that the winners will be those who can then capitalize on doing something that really brings out the experience of what they're trying to accomplish. So I think it's definitely going to be that for sure.
Thanks, Heleri. I'd like to touch on whether to use third-party operators or to do F&B in-house for hospitality. Erik Jacobs, how do you approach it when you're looking at a new hospitality project? How do you decide who's going to provide the F&B?
I think it very much depends on what you're trying to achieve in a hotel, and particularly with the restaurant. Right, I think if you are in a very good location and your space is relatively limited, then you can probably do well by running it yourself. If your space is bigger and it becomes a more dominant part of the overall kind of revenue model, then I think you need to think really hard whether you set up in the right way to do that, because it is, and it kind of relates a little bit to the in-source or, in-house or outsource F&B. It is a very particular business, right? And it is quite different from the typical hotel business. So I think there's operators that have specialized on it and have proven to be very good at it. But if you're not, and you want it to become part of a dominant part of your experience, then I think outsourcing could be the right solution. So there's not a kind of straight answer for every project, but yeah, it's just running F&B and creating that experience is a specific art that any hotel company cannot just do that easily.
We've had a question here actually, Erik, from Jose Luis Mella from CLC World. He says, the arguments in favor of leasing a hotel restaurant to a third party are powerful, but are there any frequent pitfalls worthy of a mention in the process? So what are the things you need to look out for?
Well, I think it's definitely assuming you lease out the space and therefore having security of income has now proven to be a bit of a flaw, right? So I think it's important, like any kind of operational business, that the underlying income is variable, it's flexible, and so that will always be there. So I think when you're looking for a tenant, as a hotel, for example, right, then you need to make sure that concept fits to a certain extent with the hotel, because it's all in the same building, right? And you need to be convinced that the managers of that concept can really do their job, right? And when things are tough, like they're now, that they are creative enough to find alternative ways and manage the business in a way that that can be making it a going concern. And I think that's important, and not get too blindsided by any kind of covenant or guaranteed income that somebody may offer.
When you're planning a new lock property, Erik, I can't even say Erik J because you're both Erik J. Erik Jafari. What do you look for in an F&B operator? What's on your tick list?
So, if you kind of think about it, when we go into a neighborhood, really the question is, why is it that the guest has chosen that neighborhood to stay in? I mean, we've got 4 lock properties across London, the one in Dalston, one next to the Tate Modern, one on Bermondsey Street, and one in Aldgate. And each one's completely different. And each of those micro neighborhoods are completely different. And so the type of consumer that, for example, stays next to Bermondsey Street is staying there highly likely because they might be an older hipster that appreciates the foodie scene. And so in response to that, you go and find an operator that can champion the food experience. When we opened the Dalston property, I was under the impression that what they wanted was destination dining. But when we went out and started speaking to third-party operators, the feedback that came back was that the operators that would make the most amount of money and that knew that demographic knew that it was more of a hedonistic scene, a place that locals could escape, which is why the premise of the microbrewery and the gin distillery emerged, and which is why we went down those roads. And so by partnering with local operators that understand that specific neighborhood and have a following within that specific neighborhood, by accident, we found that we were able to create these amazing local experiences that reflected the locality. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the dangers behind kind of a one-size-fits-all experience, is that the locals who are in the area will tell you what's needed and what's a replication. I remember one of the properties I wanted to put a pizza concept when I realized that there was another one just down the road that already had a huge following. It would have been a poor replica. And so it's really understanding, finding partners that understand that neighborhood, and more importantly, understand, align with our clients. Our clients are the kind of urbanites that want to get under the skin of a location, who probably are a little bit sensitive to kind of gluten-free, dairy-free, drink third wave coffee, are very into their kind of wellness and fitness. But when they do go out, they go out big. And so it's really having an F&B partner that understands kind of the fabric of that consumer on a very granular level.
Yeah. That actually brings us back to the quote from the lady at Emma at Hilton right at the start, and a question I have, which is, obviously your operators are doing this, but is hospitality, F&B in general, reflecting consumer trends well enough? The whole healthy eating and plant-based foods and stuff, or is it still generally behind the curve?
I think we're way behind the curve. I mean, Jesus. I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, service departments are 20 years behind hotels. Hotels are 20 years behind the F&B scene. So it's, we've got a long way to go. Part of the reason is the barriers to entry to launching a restaurant in Shoreditch is maybe $100 grand or $200 grand a fit out. And so you see a lot of evolution and change in response to what's happening within that area. The barriers to entry to launching a hotel are very high. And the challenge is that the decision makers that are approving the liquidity are detached from the consumer experience. Everything from the lender to the equity house. They're spending their time at Zuma and HORECA, or at some of the bigger brands, and they don't understand what's happening at kind of the street. Sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to. But it's very difficult for those people to sign off on a gin distillery or a brewery or an up and coming F&B experience. They're not the consumer, and so the moment that the decision maker isn't the consumer, you're always going to have an issue. And this is part of the reason for why hotels now always end up creating this experience that tries to cater to everyone, but then inevitably caters to no one. Club sandwich, hamburger, steak, all poorly delivered. It makes me cringe. Sorry.
We're almost coming to the end of the time, but I just wanted to touch briefly on Brexit, which is, you know, which is coming on top of the pandemic for those of us in the UK and the EU. Is Brexit affecting F&B delivery, both in terms of hiring staff and ingredients? Faraz, would you like to kick off with that one?
Sure. I think it's a bit of a tricky one for us to have a solid point of view on this, because I'm struggling to separate what's lockdown, COVID related, and what's Brexit related. I think we're seeing a few cracks starting to appear with some of our suppliers. Generally, things have been okay for now. Obviously, the demand isn't there in the way that it would have been had we not been in a lockdown at the moment, and so it'll be, you know, we might see a change as everyone starts to reopen and volumes start to go up, because I think that we could start to see some strain on supply chain with certain ingredients, and we've seen, you know, a few things starting to go up and become less available already. And then on the labour side, I think there's, you know, what we found, there are some incredible people who are looking for work at the moment, and so we've not seen any real, like, near-term issues caused by Brexit. I think we did a couple of years ago, and we noticed a shift then. More recently, haven't seen anything majorly. We hired 3 roles quite recently, 3 new chef roles, and there were about 250 job applications in a 2-week period for those 3 roles. And so, you know, it was quite difficult to try and pick from so many amazing people.
Yeah, great stuff. We have got to wrap up now, unfortunately. There's a lot more we could talk about, but thanks everybody for your fantastic contributions. The results of the poll, you'll be glad to hear, was that 81% of people will be going back to eating out as often as they can, as soon as possible. So they will be in a Lock or a Benihana or a various other establishment as soon as they can. Just like to make you guys aware of a couple of other webinar streams that we at IHM are running and will be for most of this year. Well worth joining. The first is Eloise Hanson's Boutique Hotel Trailblazer series, and the first one of those is about incremental revenue streams on January the 18th. The link to register to that is in the chat. And Paul Stevens, editor of Short Term Rentals, will be kicking off his second Rockstars series for the vacation rental industry on February the 2nd. And again, the link to register for those is in the chat. As I mentioned briefly at the start, these webinars are a precursor to the Urban Living Festival, which is taking place in London at Tobacco Dock in July. We've got a fantastic range of sponsors, speakers and media partners already confirmed, but we'd love some more. So if you'd like to get involved in what will be a great event, please contact my colleague Katie, and her details are on screen and also in the chat. If you'd like to find out more about the festival, you can follow us on our social channels. And I'd just like to thank you all for joining and say thanks to Jason, to Faraz, to the 2 Eriks, and to Heleri for their fantastic input today. And I'll see you on another webinar soon. Thanks very much, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you so much.